Welcome to this deep dive where we're going to be looking at how power dynamics can really influence creative expression.
Oh, interesting.
We've got these two really insightful articles by Kirsi Mäkinen that we're going to be using as our guide.
Okay.
And it's sort of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Society seems to demand creativity,
Yeah.
but then can subtly, shut down genuine self-expression.
Right.
So we're going to unpack some of the psychology behind this and hopefully come away with some strategies to reclaim your creative voice.
It's like society wants the benefits of creative thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The innovation, the problem solving, but not the messiness
Yeah.
of truly letting people's unique voices kind of emerge.
Yeah, and Mäkinen really dives into how this plays out, especially when we're dealing with authority figures,
Okay.
like therapists, bosses, even family members.
Right.
It's not always intentional, but they can slip into these roles that make us feel like we're back in childhood again, seeking approval or fearing judgment.
Yeah. And that can make it really tough to express ourselves freely.
Right.
Mäkinen calls this the projection loop.
Okay.
Have you ever thought about it this way? Like, we all have our own kind of unresolved inner conflicts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We tend to project them onto other people,
Uh-huh.
especially those in positions of authority.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing them as they are, we might see them as a critical parent or a demanding teacher,
Right.
and that can really stifle our creativity.
So how can we break free from this projection loop?
Well, the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
Who are the people in your life that trigger those feelings of needing to please or feeling judged? Once you start to identify those triggers, you can begin to kind of untangle that projection loop
Okay.
and create space for more authentic expression.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mäkinen also talks about this thing called parts work as a way to address these inner conflicts.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means for those of us who maybe haven't come across that term before?
Yeah. It's basically a way of understanding that we all have different parts to ourselves.
Okay.
It's like having all these different characters inside you.
Right.
For example, you might have a part that's confident and outgoing and another part that's really shy and insecure. Parts work helps you get to know these different parts, understand their needs, their fears.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you can start to integrate them and create a more harmonious inner world.
So it's kind of like those inner conflicts we project onto others.
Exactly.
By doing this parts work, we're kind of addressing the root cause rather than just managing the symptoms.
Precisely. And when we do that, we not only free ourselves from those projection loops,
Yeah.
but we also start to show up in the world in a more authentic and empowered way.
Okay, so we've got awareness, we've got parts work. What else does Mäkinen suggest?
She also talks about this tendency to categorize unconventional expression into two very simplistic and limiting roles:
Okay.
the good child and the rebellious child.
Right.
Like, think about it. A creative professional who follows their intuition might get labeled as inconsistent instead of visionary.
Uh-huh. And a woman who speaks her mind clearly
Yes.
might get called intense or too much.
Right.
Instead of being recognized for her leadership qualities.
Exactly. It's a double bind.
Yeah.
You either conform and feel stifled, or you express yourself fully and risk being rejected or misunderstood.
And that feeling of being suppressed can be so disheartening.
Yeah.
In the text, Mäkinen describes it as feeling unseen, misunderstood, having your true self left unrecognized. And she uses such vivid language.
Yeah.
She writes, eye rolls, hesitant pauses, vague compliments, and ignorance from conversations. All these micro expressions signal that your authenticity is making others uncomfortable.
Right. It's like you can sense your authenticity is not welcome even before anyone says anything.
Yeah, it's like a preemptive rejection.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, it can lead to self-censorship where you start to mute your own voice before anyone else even has the chance.
Yeah. It's like thinking, well, if I'm going to be shut down anyway, why even bother?
That's such a relatable experience. It makes me wonder, are there ways to overcome that feeling of self-censorship?
Well, Mäkinen doesn't believe in simple solutions, but she does emphasize the need for deeper self-awareness.
Yeah.
And this is where she introduces the concept of undivided inquiry.
I haven't heard of that. I'm curious to know more.
It's basically a process of continuous self-reflection and questioning your assumptions,
Okay.
like shining a light on your thought processes. When you practice undivided inquiry, you're asking yourself, why do I believe this?
Yeah.
Where did this belief come from? Is it serving me or is it limiting me?
Okay.
It's not about throwing out all your beliefs, but rather examining them with a critical eye.
So undivided inquiry helps us break free from those limiting beliefs
Yeah.
and start to trust our own inner authority more.
Exactly. And making it also encourages us to view resistance as a sign that we're onto something new,
Okay.
something that challenges the status quo. If people are getting uncomfortable, maybe it's because you're bringing something genuinely unique and innovative to the table. It's not always easy, but it can be a sign you're on the right track.
That's a really empowering perspective. Instead of seeing resistance as a reason to give up,
Right.
we can see it as a sign that we're pushing boundaries and making a real difference.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up part 1 of this deep dive, we've already uncovered some powerful insights.
Yeah.
We've explored the concept of the projection loop and how parts work can help us to address our inner conflicts and show up more authentically.
Yeah.
We've also discussed the good child and rebellious child labels
Yes.
and how they can stifle creative expression. And we've touched upon the importance of undivided inquiry as a way to challenge limiting beliefs and embrace our inner authority.
Right. What stands out to you so far?
It's striking to me that true creative expression, it's not just about talent or skill. It's so deeply connected to our emotional well-being
Yeah.
and our ability to navigate these power dynamics. If you want to unleash your creative potential, you really have to be willing to do that inner work.
Yeah.
Challenge your assumptions and create spaces where your authentic voice can truly be heard.
Right.
And we'll continue exploring these ideas in part 2, where we'll delve deeper into that concept of surrender
Okay.
as a spiritual practice and discuss practical strategies for creating environments that value authenticity. So stay tuned.
Sounds good. Welcome back. In part 1, we talked about how power dynamics can so subtly shut down creative expression.
Right.
We explored projection loops, how our inner parts kind of play into this, and how we often get stuck in those limiting good child or rebellious child roles.
Yeah, it's quite a bit to unpack.
It is.
And it made me realize how much those subtle pressures have actually impacted my own creative journey.
Yeah.
So in part 2, I'm really excited to dive deeper into Mekkonen's ideas about reclaiming our creative power,
Right.
particularly this concept of surrender that she talks about.
That's a great place to start because it's often misunderstood.
Okay.
Surrender in this context isn't about giving up.
Right.
It's more about trusting the unfolding process of your creative voice, even when it feels messy or incomplete.
I can see how that could be challenging, especially in a culture that often values perfectionism and instant results.
Yeah.
So how can we practically apply this idea of surrender to our creative work?
Imagine you're working on a project and you just hit a wall. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe you even want to give up.
Yeah.
Instead of getting caught in that spiral of self-criticism, you could practice surrender by saying to yourself, okay, I'm feeling stuck right now. I'm going to let go of the need to have all the answers and just trust that the next step will reveal itself in time.
I like that it's almost like taking the pressure off ourselves to have everything figured out
Right.
and allowing the creative process to unfold more organically.
Exactly. And this shift in perspective can also change how we receive feedback. Instead of seeing it as a judgment on our worth, we can view it as an invitation to refine and expand our expression.
That's a really helpful reframe.
Yeah.
It makes feedback feel less threatening and more like a collaborative process.
Precisely. And Mekkonen also talks about the importance of reframing the role of others in our creative journey.
Okay.
Instead of seeing them as potential critics, we can start to see them as fellow explorers, as partners in a shared process of discovery.
So instead of feeling like we need to prove ourselves to others,
Right.
we can approach creative collaborations with a sense of curiosity and openness,
Yes.
inviting others into the process with us.
And this can be particularly powerful when navigating those power dynamics we discussed earlier.
Right.
Instead of feeling intimidated or shut down by authority figures,
Yeah.
we can engage in a dialogue, asking questions and seeking guidance from a place of empowerment rather than fear.
In part 1, we talked about how certain people can trigger those feelings of needing to please or feeling judged.
Yeah.
Do you think that reframing the role of others could help us to navigate those tricky situations?
Absolutely. When we shift from a mindset of proving ourselves to a mindset of shared inquiry, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
It allows us to see feedback, even from those in positions of authority, as valuable information that can help us to refine our ideas and grow as creators.
So instead of feeling like we need to defend our work, We can approach feedback with a sense of curiosity and openness,
Right.
asking questions like, can you tell me more about what you're seeing here, or what specifically resonates with you and what doesn't?
Those are great examples. And by engaging in that way,
Yeah.
you're not only showing respect for the other person's perspective,
Uh-huh.
but you're also creating an opportunity for a deeper level of understanding and connection.
Makinen also talks about how important it is to find or create environments that value authenticity.
Yes.
I imagine this is so crucial because if you're constantly surrounded by people who are trying to fit you into a box, it's going to be really hard to let your true creative voice emerge.
That's so true. And she's not just talking about physical spaces, although that can be important. It's also about the energetic spaces we inhabit, the communities we choose to be a part of, the relationships we cultivate.
So it's about being mindful of the people we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And the kind of energy they bring into our lives.
Exactly. And if you find yourself in an environment that feels stifling or limiting, it might be time to consider seeking out new communities, whether that's online or in person.
Right.
It's about finding your tribe, the people who get you, who appreciate your unique gifts, and who encourage you to shine your brightest.
It makes me think of that quote, your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yeah.
If you're putting out authentic energy, you're more likely to attract people who resonate with that.
That's a great way to put it. And sometimes it might even mean creating your own space,
Okay.
building your own community where authenticity is celebrated and encouraged. It could be as simple as starting a small group with like-minded friends or launching an online platform where people can share their creative work without fear of judgment.
I love that it's about taking ownership and creating the kind of world we want to live in where creativity can flourish.
Right.
And everyone feels empowered to express themselves freely, but I imagine that's not always easy.
Of course, not building a community takes effort.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to put yourself out there, especially if you've been conditioned to play it safe and avoid vulnerability.
So how can we overcome those fears and step into that space of authentic creative expression, even when it feels scary?
Makinen talks about the courage to show up fully, to let your authenticity stand, not as something needing correction, but as something that expands the boundaries of what's possible.
Right.
It's a call to action, an invitation to step into our power and share our unique gifts with the world.
I'm struck by how much of what we've been talking about comes back to this idea of mindset.
Yeah.
If we can shift from a mindset of fear and self-doubt to a mindset of courage and self-belief,
Right.
it seems like that's a huge step in the right direction.
It's a fundamental shift, and it's not always easy.
Right.
But when we can tap into that inner strength, that knowing that our voice matters,
Yeah.
it can be incredibly liberating.
And it seems like that inner strength is something that we can cultivate through practices like undivided inquiry, surrender, and reframing the role of others.
Absolutely.
It's like we're building a toolbox of strategies to help us navigate the challenges of expressing ourselves authentically in a world that doesn't always make it easy.
That's a great analogy. It's like we're building a muscle, the muscle of authentic self-expression.
Okay.
And the more we practice, the stronger that muscle becomes.
So in part 2, we've explored these powerful concepts of surrender, reframing the role of others, and finding or creating environments that value authenticity.
We have.
We've also talked about the importance of mindset and the courage to show up fully and express our unique gifts with the world. What's standing out to you as we head into part 3?
I'm struck by how this whole conversation about creative expression is intertwined with our personal growth and our spiritual journey. It's not just about making things.
Yeah.
It's about becoming more fully who we are meant to be.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I'm excited to explore that deeper connection in part 3, where we'll delve into the spiritual aspects of creative expression
Okay.
and discuss how we can use our creativity as a tool for healing and transformation. Okay, so we've covered like a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We started by unpacking how power dynamics can so subtly like just shut down creative expression. And then in part 2, we explored some strategies like surrender and reframing the role of others to reclaim that power.
Right.
Now, in part 3, I'm really intrigued to like explore this idea that Makinen brings up about creative expression as a spiritual practice.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
You see, Makinen believes that by embracing the unfolding mystery of becoming, we can actually deepen our connection to something greater than ourselves. It's like creativity becomes this pathway to connect with our soul,
Yeah.
with that universal source of inspiration and wisdom that flows through all of us.
So it's not just about making art or writing a song.
Right.
It's about tapping into a deeper wellspring of creative energy that connects us all.
Exactly. And Makinen suggests that by cultivating a sense of curiosity and playfulness in our creative process, we can actually tap into a deeper level of flow and inspiration. It's like when we let go of the need to control everything, to have all the answers.
Right.
That's when the real magic happens.
That makes me think about all those times I've gotten stuck in a project trying to force things to work a certain way.
Yeah.
Maybe the key is to loosen my grip a bit, to allow myself to be more playful and experimental.
That's a great insight. And remember that concept of undivided inquiry we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, it can be applied here too.
Yeah.
Approaching our creative work with a sense of openness and wonder, allowing ourselves to be guided by our intuition, by those sparks of inspiration that arise from deep within.
So instead of approaching a creative project with like a rigid plan,
Right.
we might start with a question, a feeling, an image, and then allow the work to unfold organically from there.
Precisely. And trusting that the creative process will unfold in its own time and its own way. Our job is simply to show up, to be present, and to follow those threads of inspiration wherever they may lead.
Right.
Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most beautiful destinations.
That's a great way to put it. But what about those times when we feel blocked, when the creative energy just doesn't seem to be flowing? Does Makinen offer any guidance for those moments?
She does.
Okay.
She talks about how power dynamics can actually block the flow of creative energy in the body. She writes, when the energy is blocked in the body, the information delivery between body-mind is inhibited, and we recognize it as resistance. Think about those unexpressed emotions, those creative impulses we might be holding back.
Yeah.
They can literally get stuck in our bodies and create tension and blockages.
So it's not just a mental block.
Right.
It's a physical one, too.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to force a river to flow uphill. It's just not going to work very well.
Okay.
I think this is where practices like mindfulness movement and somatic experiencing can be so valuable. They help us to release those blockages to get that energy flowing again so that our creative expression can flow more freely.
So it's about creating space for our authentic voice to emerge, not just from our minds, but from our whole being.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. And I think that's what Makinen's ultimately pointing to. This idea that authentic creative expression is not just about what we produce.
Yeah.
It's about who we are becoming in the process.
Right.
It's about embodying that creative spirit in all aspects of our lives, not just in our art or our work, but in our relationships and our communities, in the way we move through the world.
Makinen also talks about this beautiful concept of the creative mystic.
Yes.
Someone who walks that path of self-discovery and creative expression with a sense of reverence and humility.
It's about recognizing that creativity is not something we own or control.
Right.
It's something we participate in, something we co-create with a force that's much larger than ourselves. It's a humbling perspective, and it invites us to approach our creative work with a sense of gratitude and awe.
It makes me think about those moments when I've felt completely lost in a creative project, almost like I'm being guided by an unseen hand. It's a magical feeling, and I think it speaks to that deeper connection to something beyond ourselves.
It's a beautiful description, and when we wrap up this deep dive into Makinen's work,
Yeah.
I think the key takeaway is that authentic creative expression is not a destination.
Okay.
It's a journey.
It's an ongoing process of self-discovery, of unfolding, of becoming more fully who we were meant to be. And it's a journey that's worth taking.
Yes.
Not just for the sake of creating beautiful things, but for the sake of our own soul's evolution.
I'd like to leave you with this question that Makinen poses in her writing.
Okay.
If true creativity thrives in the space of not knowing, how can you embrace uncertainty and allow your voice to emerge more freely?
That's something to ponder, something to experiment with, something to embody in your own unique creative journey.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating,
Yeah.
and keep allowing your authentic voice to shine through.
And remember, the world needs your unique voice just as it is messy, imperfect, and brilliant.